Yeah, I'm Shaun Bunn. I'm the Managing Director of Empire Metals, and we're working on our Pitfield Titanium project in Western Australia, which has been, to be honest, been going at an absolute amazing, cracking development pace.
You have been going at a lick there, Shaun. But first, I also, another thing that's been going at a fair lick is your share price. Things have really started to move recently. What's driving that?
Well, I think obviously there's some macro, world events that are sort of combining to sort of push people towards these critical minerals, these critical metals. I think in our case, that we're building credibility. For the last year or so, we've been setting ourselves to reach certain milestones, deliver on our promises, and I think we've done a really good job of that. For instance, most recently, last month or so, we announced that we'd push forward to making a high-value, high-purity product, titanium product. That's a bit of a breakthrough in the sense that we got to 99.25% TO2 in a pigment with none of the nasties, none of the deleterious elements, none of the uranium, thorium, chromes, the things that affect pigment. So that just proved, I think, to the market, the industry, that our ore body is quite amenable to downstream processing.
And obviously, this is without an MRE yet. Is that right?
Yeah, we're advancing towards that. Again, we did look at producing an MRE earlier this year. We decided to go back and do another round of drilling. So we drilled in June, the biggest drill program we've run to date. So we did about 180 drill holes, another 10,000 metres of drilling. And we've done that for a particular reason. We targeted the Thomas prospect. We went in and drilled on a much smaller grid, and obviously the objective is not only to get our maiden MRE out, but to have it in a high level of confidence so that we can advance to mine design and start talking about ore reserves at some stage.
Right, and obviously you've gone early with the kind of metallurgy and trying to understand how that works, and some new company hires as well to ensure you're doing it right. What kind of specific flow sheet options are you prioritizing in terms of gravity, flotation, hydro, etc.?
The front end is falling into place really nicely. We announced again that we were doing bulk metallurgical gravity test work and punching some of that material through to the flotation testing stage. That's underway. It's well advanced. No great surprises. Everything's sort of coming through the way we would have expected. So the front end of the circuit, getting into a concentrate that is, that we can advance to the beneficiation stage. That's, whether that's an acid leach or another conventional type process. I mean, that's going really well, and I hope to have an update available shortly to sort of lay out the whole flow sheet. So how do we get from the ground, the ore in the ground, to that final product that they made, we made a few months ago? That's going to come out over the next short period, and we'll be talking then about recoveries. We'll be talking about the overall efficiency of the process. So I'm really happy with progress being made, but it's still a work in progress.
But where are you in terms of deciding what that end product is? Obviously, you talked about pigment grade titanium oxide, but and titanium concentrate. What about titanium metal precursor, things like that? And what gives you the best margin down the line?
The really important thing here is always being, what comes along for the ride that the end users, the sponge metal, the metal guys don't want. For instance, we've got very low levels of contaminants into this product that we've made. The change up between making a pigment that we've made and making a specific feedstock to the metal industry is pretty minor, and it might require one or two more steps in the process, but it's not a complete change of direction. The optionality that we can get from this ore body is amazing. We don't have the ilmenite type concentrates. We don't end up with the iron from the ilmenite creating an environmental waste product. and we end up with a very clean, TiO2 pigment type product at the moment. So I see us as being strategically very well placed to go and talk to, these emerging titanium metal producers. Lots of interest in making titanium powder. Lots of interest in making, specific titanium metal parts for the aircraft industry. So we are, I think, well positioned to tap into those opportunities.
Right, but obviously, you don't want to run before you walk, etc. And obviously, I know you're building up the technical team around this one. But in terms of those kind of the point at which you send out kind of bulk samples to these potential end users, I mean, when do you start kind of increasing the scale of those conversations, and does that run in parallel with getting the MRE out, for instance?
It probably doesn't run in parallel with the MRE, to be honest. It's not basically a precursor for that anyway. So what we're focused on, the MRE is incredibly important. It's going to be one of those huge milestones, one of those breakthrough moments, I think, for us. It establishes, with a high degree of confidence as being, the giant of the industry. So, we position ourselves as being, not only large, we position ourselves as being located in a tier 1 excellent mining jurisdiction close to infrastructure. We're positioning ourselves, on the basis of high purity, clean ore. So all those factors are important to attract, I think, parties, third parties that want that security of supply for a very long time. The second part of the story then is obviously the process. Once you're working through that at the moment, it's conventional. The technology we're applying is not complicated. It's fundamentally green. We're not making iron residues. We've got access to wind energy, solar energy. So we're really focused on that green energy concept. And the purity of the material coming through, I'll just take that one step further. The purity of the material that's coming through into our final product means that we can make multiple types of titanium products. We don't have to be, a single one-trick pony. So that's going to take time. Time to get to that last phase. And, whilst I'd love to rush forward and keep trying to make products, I want to just go back and get that processing phase working smoothly, get to a piloting process as quickly as we can, which will certainly be early next year, start to produce quantities of these sorts of products, and that's when I think we hit the get on the planes, get on the road, start talking to our strategics and our potential market customers.
So, like I said, I'm probably getting ahead of myself, and I don't want you to get ahead of yourself either here. But you talk about like a green product, so things like cost, energy implications of producing pigments versus metals in Western Australia versus shipping concentrate abroad. And are you starting to sort of think about those sorts of things at the moment? Pre the pilot plants being scoped out, etc. Because obviously, you guys weren't in this sector, a few years ago, and then you're jumping into a space which there's very little competition, and it seems, but also in the same breath, very few people have kind of got these things over the line. So in terms of how you go about building out the business plan or business case for doing it the way that you want, have you got the people on board to do that now? Where's that knowledge coming from?
We're blessed to be based here in Western Australia, Perth. I mean, we're at one of the biggest mining hubs around the world. There's a huge push here for technology and advancement. The federal government's scientific research agency, CSIRO, they're based here in Perth. We've got multiple, people working across, the university sectors, working through the understanding our minerals. So simply put, I don't have on the books at the moment, I'm not going to take on the books either, a dozen experts that I can actually access based on a simple, consulting and support services here in this location. So we're going to use people as best we can, but we're also going to focus on, applying conventional, simple technology that already exists to bring this project to fruition.
So give me that order of play then, in terms of what you and the board consider the important phases to go through in some kind of linear fashion or parallel fashion. How are you planning this?
So the MRE certainly will come out by early Q4 at this rate. We would anticipate putting that milestone out there. The bulk test work samples that we said we had got into the labs, sort of earlier this year, the test work has started on refining the process options that we want to test in a larger scale. I anticipate having a majority of that finished by the end of the year. So going into 2026, the team is focused on setting up continuous piloting. And we're going to try and look at how we can leverage off the local industry here. The metallurgical laboratories here in Perth are well equipped to be able to do a lot of the work for us. So we're going to work on that as an initial front and start to build a confidence in our flow sheet. Scoping study, pre-feas study will be run in parallel. So, the timeline looks pretty hectic, and there's a lot to happen in next year. But, to be honest, every time we've set ourselves a goal and a target, we've been able to actually come forward and beat that. So I think 2026 is going to be, the real breakout for us in terms of, we are the emerging, we are going to change the industry. I think it's as simple as that. In my mind, the old ilmenite heavy mineral industry is suffering high costs, inefficiencies. The western part of the supply chain can't compete against the Chinese supply. We're going to change that. And I think by the end of next year, everyone will start to realise that this Pitfield project represents the changing of the guard.
Okay, so in terms of then here to the end of the year, deliverables, so there's a lot going on this year and into next year. In terms of the scoping out the pilot plant, in terms of like scale and timelines, etc., how are you going to kind of assess the complexity of that, cost escalation, etc.? Because when I look around the market, I said to you, you don't have a lot of competition, which is great news, but at the same time, that kind of learning curve is going to be there for you guys. So, in terms of the risk assessment component, how do you go about doing that? You're using external consultants for sure. Are you telling me that's a relatively simple process and therefore don't worry about it? Or, have you kind of looking around the market yourself and going, well, actually, there's some learnings, there's some opportunities here? So
we've come a long way down the understanding of the mineral system that we're dealing with, the types of titanium minerals, but probably equally as important, the gangue materials that we need to reject during that upfront process. Our recent, smaller scale test work on mineral separation is really encouraging. And what that sets us up, if you like, is it means that we can lock in the first phase, the first part of our processing flow sheet. We can almost lock that in now. So, within a couple of months, we'll optimize that through our test work. We can start continuously testing that at a bigger scale. We do have options around the second phase. That's take the concentrate, get the titanium into solution, before you go to the final product stage. That has options, and I see that as a really positive thing. I don't want to lock in a preferred option too early. we need to test a few things. What we did and what we've announced is that we basically took the existing conventional sulfate, titanium sulfate process, and we applied it to our material, our concentrates, and it worked very well. So that's how we got to the 99.25% purity product. That's how we demonstrated that if we wanted to apply a conventional process, it would work very well. What we're seeking is that additional advantage. So we're applying a couple of new techniques that that's been researched and looked at, but doesn't apply to ilmenite, doesn't apply to the heavy mineral sands guys. So we have this unique ore, this unique material. We're trying to get the extra advantage out of that. I don't want to copy conventional industry practice. If something we can develop gives us a cost and efficiency advantage. So that's going to happen in the next few months. That's not like 12, we're not sitting here going, oh, well, let's spend the next 5 years studying this. It's fast, it's accurate, the test work is underway, the laboratories are capable of doing it. We'll have answers early next year as to what the process flow sheet will look like, and we'll be able to go straight into, continuous piloting and optimization. So really very rapid development, but I do believe it's because the material it's just continues to behave and respond really well to the test conditions we're applying.
Okay, so the MRE's coming out this year. You've got currently the kind of exploration target is less than 20% of the mineralized system. I think that's what I remember from the last conversation. What's the attitude to getting to market, showing a route to market, showing a route to kind of cash flowing, versus building out the kind of scale of this thing with the kind of broader Pitfield system, Thomas, Cosgrove, etc.
Having an ore body that's capable of feeding a multi-generational, hundreds of years of operational life. It's not going to change the NPV of a financial model, but what it does do is it creates certainty. The world doesn't want lots of little mines anymore. The old days where you just have lots of little mining operations, with short mine lives, digging up the ground and basically leaving that legacy issue. We're going to be there for the long haul. So the infrastructure, the government investments, the marketing, the offtakes, all the partnerships that fall with that, both within the local communities, the state and federal governments, and our customers. I mean, they all know we're around for the long haul. And so I think, when's enough ore, when's the MRE big enough? The one we're going to announce come this quarter is more than big enough.
Okay. And what about the kind of the high grade versus bulk component? Obviously, recently delivered grades of like 7-8%, those sorts of numbers, reasonable thick intercepts. Does that kind of start to inform the decision making around the where you start and what you focus on in the earlier days?
It certainly again allows us to accelerate development. So rather than sit there and start looking looking over the fence for where the grass might be greener, we've got a very good target up front. So we can advance that. It won't stop us from drilling out some other targets from time to time. It won't stop us from sterilisation drilling. There's more drilling to be done. But the pressure on us to go out and find more ore is zero. We don't need that. What we need to do is understand the nature and the characteristics of this particular target that we're focusing on. Make sure it's going to give us the optimal feedstock for a process, and then continue to optimize the process to get to to go into the feasibility type scale studies. Get some real hard numbers around the economics.
And well, obviously, and before then, I guess helping people understand the potential of the economics in terms of the kind of the sort of near surface mineralization, and in terms of the early mine development. What should we be looking at if we wanted to kind of get ahead of the game there on the economics?
We often say there's no comparable to this particular, ore body, its characteristics, scale, all the factors around Pitfield make it unique. But what I've been starting to think about is okay, well, how does it stack up against, say, a heavy mineral sands production through to pigment or metal? Where do we sit, on cost and efficiencies? And we're starting to see distinct advantages coming out of the Pitfield project that look like we can be not only achieve high recoveries across the ore body. That's something that we're working to look for, but we're also looking for ways that we will be able to produce the titanium at a much lower unit cost. And let's, and that's basic mining economics 101. If you can make the material for cheaper than the next guy, you're going to be in the box seat going forward. So I think we can do it, and I think that's because of the ore. It's not some sort of self-belief or pointing to anything in particular. It's just saying, look, the ore body itself is not an iron-rich, ilmenite-rich ore body. It behaves differently, and so far it looks to be it's amenable to beneficiation and lower operating cost.
Is it, what compared to like ilmenite sands or hard rock deposits? It performs differently. Is it cheaper to process? I guess what we're getting at.
We believe it will be. We haven't got numbers to back that up. We don't have to. We haven't got to that phase of the study level. But again, you just point to chemistry facts. The anatase-rich doesn't need as much acid to digest as ilmenite. There's no iron to break down. And no disposal issues relating to the disposal of that iron. So there's some chemistry, mineralogy advantages over the industry that we see Pitfield brings to the table.
Okay, so you have said, right, okay, scale is important globally in terms of the life of mine and the multi-generational production here. But in terms, what's your views on kind of staged or smaller startup operations versus these kind of higher capex development projects that we see elsewhere?
Pitfield will be suitable for a sort of staged approach. We can modularize lots of the process. So, there are a lot of reasons why people don't want to stage an ore, a processing facility, for instance. A lot of that has to do with scale of economy and basically if you duplicate your plant, quite often you don't get any advantages of the original investment. So we're going to look at ways that we can upscale each phase as we go. The front end is basically a mineral separation stage, so it's relatively easy to duplicate if you want to expand. The back end is something that we would look to make sure we built in capacity, so that you don't want to build two refineries. You build one refinery which can be expanded. So all of that is something that we'll be putting into the scoping and pre-feas sort of levels that we're going to go to next year and see what the numbers show. But the market's quite capable of taking, a pretty decent supply out of Pitfield. The market's growing at such a great rate. Yeah, we wouldn't, if we came on at full scale, we wouldn't necessarily fill the increase in demand. It would very quickly be taken up over the year or two.
And what is the kind of competition out there, and how do you kind of insert yourself into that ecosystem, right? Because you got to, obviously, look, we're early stage now, but you've moved at quite a rate. You sound like you're talking a game of moving quite quickly through the phases here. You're going to have to work out how you get this thing financed, strategic partners, marketing partners, and buyers. How's the market today, and what do you kind of view the supply-demand fundamentals like going forward? Because it will affect your ambition, aggression initially, and maybe say, well, let's be careful here. So, the market can be erratic. Do we get a partner in to kind of help us navigate that, finance that, or do we think we think we can insert ourselves into a kind of a strong positive market ourselves? I mean, how do you play that business development side of things?
Well, let's say with the titanium market as a sort of whole, I think it's gone through a bit of a slump in terms of demand. It's growing, but it's not growing at the rates it was probably growing a few years ago. The impacts of world consumption, China slowing down, and the other factor, of course, is China's expanding its output of fairly low quality but cheap titanium products. So there's a sort of a macro dynamic there that's putting pressure on the Western production cycle. Interesting enough, the demand for the metal is still rapidly growing. The strategic value of that has, it's not going to lose its importance. So titanium metal for the defence industry alone is getting a lot of attention out of Europe and the US, obviously. So we see an opportunity, if you like, to come into the market in the next few years where we can provide price security, we can provide supply, confidence in our supply chains being located in such a fantastic jurisdiction, and we can look to leverage off the federal government's, Australian federal government's critical minerals facilities, which are desperately trying to secure downstream production, back in Australia. Something we probably lost 10, 20, 40 years ago. We just started shipping concentrates and let others make the final product. We've gone full circle, and the federal government's investing billions of dollars into industry to try and bring that downstream refining and metal production back to Australia. So I'm confident that in the next few years we'll not only be able to secure government backing, but I think the demand from those strategics, the aircraft, the aerospace industry, defence industries is going to be even more compelling.
I mean, when you're looking to develop something like this, obviously you're as you said, the market's been a bit of a slump, and you be conscious of other projects kind of coming into a very tight market like that. What are the things that you can do to improve your margins in terms of the economics, in terms of the way that you go about kind of building the company out, preserving that kind of cash drain, that cash expenditure now, and pre FID or feed, and beyond?
The way that we've gone about it to date has been very much focused on what are the important problems to solve, not necessarily do it in the conventional order of saying, let's get an MRE, let's get a process, let's get a mining route, let's then talk about products. We went as rapid as we could to sort of understand the product side of the equation, and I think that was a great strategy, because we're now able to look at the optionality of those products, who wants what, and almost redesign back how we're going to process our ore to deliver those sorts of products. And we can differentiate ourselves, from the ilmenites of the world, from the others who really don't have that optionality. We can also start to think about byproducts. Pitfield is an interesting, ore body, and whilst we're not sort of flagging, that we've suddenly found some other interesting commodity, there are elements and metals that are coming through with the titanium that we're going to go and look at their commercial value. So, the concept is if they're going to come with the concentrate, then what can we do to commercialise those? Again, something that the titanium, the ilmenite industry doesn't have the luxury. I mean, they make iron. They make iron sulfate. Doesn't sell for very much, and most of it gets put into residue disposal facilities. So we've got to look at every advantage that the ore body represents, and work out how we can take advantage of that in our process development phase, which is what we'll be working on over the next 4 to 6 months before going into that continuous process piloting to produce products. So that's all achievable. We're working on a number of fronts, but I think that is where we can, Matthew, that's where we're going to differentiate ourselves again from 95% of the industry. 95% of the world's titanium comes from ilmenite. So if you can do it cheaper, more efficient and greener, you really have a distinct competitive advantage.
Okay, in terms of balance sheet at the moment, kind of working your way through all of this, you've got some non-titanium assets as well. Are you looking to offload those?
Yeah, we don't spend we're not spending marginal amount of time and money, enough to keep the tenements in good standing, but we're not working actively on these. So, at what point do they become a hindrance and a distraction? Answer's probably about now.
Okay.
So, yeah, we would look to get them off the books if that was possible without spending an awful lot of time on it. It's not a big issue for us, but it's something that I would think we need to look at the strategic assets that we want to build around Pitfield. I think is probably a better way of thinking about it. Access to infrastructure, access to more tenure that might be suitable for building plant and facilities and those types of options.
Right. Okay. And okay, that makes sense. And then I guess the other thing is I referenced it in the conversation earlier with regards to strategics. It's a bit early days, but you're getting to be an interesting size, and maybe people don't want to kind of miss out in terms of bringing strategics on for technical know-how, for maybe access to capital, for access to ability to kind of help you get this thing built out, etc. When do those conversations happen? Is it after the kind of bulk testing phase? Is it after MRE, or do you need to demonstrate economics to the marketplace? I mean, how do you time that?
We started conversations. It's not like we don't have initial. We've introduced ourselves. Others, some of those groups have introduced themselves to us, but they're still very high level and exploratory at this stage. And I think that's the right way to keep them. Not locked down too early on a particular group or party that might, express interest, but then basically just put you on the back burner, for instance. Rio is a classic example, and I'm not speaking ill of Rio, but they've had a change of management, a change of heart. Is the titanium industry one that they want to continue in? That's certainly rumours running that they're considering, exiting. And I look at that and I thought, well, maybe the new CEO heard about us and realises that we're coming and realises that the old industries, as I said, a bit of a dinosaur, might become extinct. So I like the idea of keeping our options open. I like the idea of working, for instance, with local agencies, the government here in Australia, but also other governments to find more strategic partnerships, and then get introduced to, say, some of the strategic metal producers or the strategic customers that use the end products, the metal, because I think that's where we're going to get maximum interest and maximum support. I don't think we're going to get that from players in the heavy mineral sands industry that we're basically looking to replace.
Yeah, well, it'd be interesting to sort of see how. And look, I think there's a lot of projects being offloaded by some of the big guys. We'll see how and where Rio will get focused, remain focused, or not in the coming months. Just in terms of you though, you obviously laid out the kind of quite a busy period between now and end of the year. Next year, how aggressively will you want to kind of move through the kind of economic phases? And given the relative simplicity as you've laid out of what you're trying to do we expect to see PEA, PFS, DFS, and what's that sort of timeline look like?
As we previously announced, we did a nice fundraise earlier this year with some strategics. We raised just over £4.5 million. So we're well cashed up to get through this phase. That money is going to go towards completing these test work, metallurgical test works, the MRE that we're coming out at the end of the year or in the last quarter, and moving into early phases of piloting and scoping next year. So the basic answer is that we will advance, subject to successful testing and piloting. We're going to advance very quickly into a pre-feas sort of level. When does scoping stop and pre-feas start is a bit of a blur in many cases. So all we really want to be doing is constantly testing the options, moving into getting some economics, making decisions about which options that we take forward to the next level, and then start to get more confidence in the final numbers before we make a decision to invest. Take the risks. Keep de-risking the process and the project. So I see all of that evolving and running through next year, with a view that we would be in a really advanced stage of economic studies, going into 2027. Whether that gives us whether we're in a position to make a decision to mine, I don't know. That's going to be an outcome of a lot of hard work over the next, say 12 to 18 months.
And what are you going to do about taking advantage of this kind of critical minerals environment? Obviously, you mentioned the Australian government in there, but obviously the US seems to be leading the way. Could that be a big market for you? Would you look at an OTC listing? How do you play that?
We're quoted on the OTC.
You are? Okay.
We are quoted now. We've managed to get a quote running, I think probably about March we came on.
Okay, sorry, I missed that.
That was, that's it's a big market obviously, but we're a very small part of that at the moment because it does take time and require a lot of energy and effort to get out there and promote to such a broad investment community. But yeah, we've got that optionality. We've talked, and it's not the first time we've said this, I think, publicly, that we would be interested in looking at a dual listing here in Australia at some stage. That's still something that we would think would be an important strategic move. I think it gives us access to a different type of sophisticated sort of mining investor here in Australia. That the market here is going really gangbusters at the moment. So I'd like to think that we could have we'd have an international flavour, if you like. The London listing has been great. We're marketing into Europe at the moment. We're talking to the US. To get into the Australian market as well would be a coup.
Okay, well, Shaun, appreciate the update. Sounds like things are motoring along at a high speed as usual with you guys. So good to catch up. Appreciate your time, and obviously stay in touch with certainly some of these things coming through with regards to obviously MRE most certainly later this year. Appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome, Matthew. Thanks.